it's always a good thing to have one hand down and one hand up and try to help the people, pull them up to another level if they're looking to do that maybe don't have as much experience or as
Right.
much success as you do.
Your network is your net worth. Come listen to some of the most successful people I know share invaluable knowledge, stories, and advice in real estate, business, and beyond. This is Weiss Advice. Whether you want to take your business or personal life to the next level, look no further. Welcome back to another episode of Weiss Advice. I am excited to be here today. Another amazing podcast episode with another incredible guest. We got Owen Dashner on the show. Welcome to the show, my friend. How are you?
Oh, I'm great, man. Thanks for having me. This is going to be a lot of fun. This is returning a favor too. So, matter of fact, your guest appearance on our podcast is going to be airing tomorrow, I believe. So.
Oh, wow. Okay. So this is recording
serendipitous.
A few weeks earlier than this will release. So we'll definitely make sure to check that out on the REIA radio podcast. Is it actual radio? I mean, is it you go on the radio or you just call it that?
No, we're just trying to be cute with the name.
Right.
So
okay. I mean, does anyone listen to the radio anymore? Really? I mean, Spotify.
I don't know. I don't know if Sirius satellite radio counts, but
okay, that's true.
In that camp. So
but
my daughter does still like the top 40 genre, so she tunes into that every once in a while.
Yeah, that's true. Sirius is pretty prolific out there with tons of channels. We even have an amazing friend and client, Luke, all the way out from he's from Nashville, but actually from New York City, but they're down in Destin, Florida. Luke Carl, he runs a heavy metal. He's a DJ on heavy metal.
Sirius, I know Luke.
Okay, awesome. Oh, because he
got the look too.
He's in Nebraska also. I think he's from Nebraska, about Omaha originally, right?
Yeah, he's pretty active member of like a real estate Facebook group that a lot of us are in. They're active investors here. I know his wife does the short-term rentals, short-term show.
Exactly, the short-term shop. Right, but I forgot he owns some property in Omaha also, which is where he's originally from. So without further ado, I mean, Owen, you're based in Omaha, Nebraska, which is how I made that connection right away between Luke and. I'd love to hear for our listeners who are really familiar with your story. I'd love for you to give take an opportunity to share kind of how you got started in real estate and what you're up to.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me, obviously, by the way. And I kind of started out in a family where a lot of people that were adults were entrepreneurs. So my mom and my dad both owned their own businesses, multiple businesses when I was growing up. So that was just normal to me. And I got to probably close to senior year of high school, and I started kind of panicking because I didn't really know what I wanted to be when I grew up. And I just had to pick a major and ended up changing my majors a couple of times. Ended up in a business major and went to 4 different colleges, that's how everybody does. I finally finished that up. And then I went on to, basically I fell into recruiting, and I got into that type of work. Did it for a number of years. I worked for a third-party agency for a while. I did IT recruiting in the late 90s and kind of around Y2K. And then I translated that into a corporate recruiting type of a job. And I eventually got into that, did some program management within recruiting and HR, worked for IBM, ConAgra Foods, some other bigger Fortune 100 companies. Got a lot of really good experience there. But the longer I was doing that, the more I realized that, am I going to look up when I'm, 65 years old and be really happy that I did program management in recruiting? And there were some fun parts of the job, and I did learn a lot. Don't get me wrong about that. And I'm thankful for the experience, but I was just more and more dissatisfied with the trajectory that my life was going work-wise. And there's got to be something else out there that I can do, that I can get into, invest in. And I was fascinated with investing from an early age. I went to college, and on my 18th birthday, I bought shares of Gillette because they would send I think it was a Mach 3 razor. That was their original flagship product. They would mail those to 18-year-old kids on I think it was their 16th or 18th birthday. You would get those in the mail. And I'm like, this is awesome. And then I started kind of researching the company, and I ended up buying some shares. And I got involved in investing early, was really interested in business, and eventually, after I did, my recruiting gig for quite a while, I decided I'd had kind of enough, and I wanted to put a plan together to get out of the rat race like a lot of people do that are in W-2 jobs. So I started buying real estate when I was let's see, this would have been 2005. So roughly 28, 29, 30 years old. That's when I started buying my first properties. I took stock of basically what my skills were, what my knowledge was, and what my financial situation was. And I realized that my financial situation was not great for buying really expensive things, right?
Right.
Because whenever I was thinking about real estate, I was always just a rich man's game. And I was like, I'll do that someday. And then someday
Mm,
became a few years later, and I just never did it. So I started
right.
reading a lot of books about, well, it first started with financial planning, and then eventually I got into some real estate books as well. Read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and read a lot of books, and finally ended up deciding I was going to flip a house. That was going to be my first deal. I needed money to operate. I wanted to get rentals eventually, but I needed to
Right.
build up some cash first. So that was basically my first purchase. So I kind of did that for a while. I did that from probably 2005 up until the great financial crisis. And then I had a handful of rentals. I kind of knew a little bit about what I was doing with rehabbing houses and buying them off market and things like
Right.
that. And ended up really stepping on the gas during the GFC and bought a lot of foreclosures. I
Wow.
found a small town bank that was willing to give me a shot, and they would loan me, purchase and rehab money. And that was, I mean, so basically I got into projects for 100% financing.
Yeah.
And
That's crazy.
that's not around anymore, unfortunately, with this
Right.
bank. Otherwise, I'd still be using it. But I just started buying rentals, and I got to about 20, and I started getting really stressed. I had a full-time job. At the time, I had two young daughters and married. My wife worked at the time. She traveled quite a bit. It was just a lot. It was a lot to handle with having all that going on.
Sure.
And I had a friend that eventually he was kind of in my ear about taking over property management for me. And I was always like, no, 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 because in my mind, I was like, I need to build up my passive cash flow,
Right.
air quotes around passive, but I need to build up my cash flow so that I can exceed my monthly expenses and be able to quit my job if I still want to. And for me, giving up that cash flow to pay a property manager to do something I was doing, that was just like, why would I do that?
Right.
Eventually, I hit a breaking point with one that came vacant. I'm like, all right, Doug, this one's all yours. I had a tenant move out, see what you can do with it. So they took it over and they got it rented for, it was either like 100 or 150 bucks more a month than I would have charged. This is a single family house. And they got it rented in like less than a week. And so that was a really big facepalm moment for me where I realized that it's the who, not how.
Oh yeah.
There's a book now that's written about it, but it's more important to use leverage with not just financing properties, but also people that know how
Yeah.
to do things better than you.
Exactly.
And so that was a big light bulb moment for me. Over the years, I started buying a little bit bigger properties. So I got in like my first multifamily, I think I bought in 2014. It was just a fourplex. And then I started buying a little bit bigger stuff. So, it went from 4 to 6 to an 8 to a 12 to 20 and 30, and then a little bit bigger, and just started doing that. And then eventually I got involved with a couple of meetup groups that have grown to be pretty substantial in the Omaha area. The local RIA, which is run by my good friend Ted, and he's now my co-host on a podcast,
Yeah.
RIA Radio, for those of you who want to tune in. And I just started meeting all these people. And I had never, while I was working in my full-time job, I had kind of just kept it quiet, didn't
Hmm.
really tell many people about it. All of my old friends or my existing friends, they didn't have, like, their mind didn't work the way mine did with regard to like just not being happy, just having a job. And so I met all these people, and it was just like a whole new world out there of other investors that were like-minded. They were way more experienced than I was. Some of them were less, but I got a kick out of doing that too, like meeting with the newer people and just feeling like, hey, I don't know everything, but here's some stuff that I learned along the way,
Yeah.
while at the same time learning other things from other more experienced people. And so that's kind of how I did it. And eventually that led to other opportunities to buy different types of assets. I left my job in 2017 and formed basically a partnership with another guy that I met along the way who was flipping houses. So we decided to start that business. We kind of like dated for a while. We'd have lunches, we'd talk all the time on the phone. And then when I figured out that he was a great guy and just had the same, true north that I did with regard to ethics and integrity and morals and family values and those kind of things,
Yeah.
that I got comfortable with it. And it was a lot easier to kind of take the leap when you have somebody doing it with you, as opposed to just saying, does this feel right? I don't know if this is the right time. And trying to figure that all out on yourself. So we started that business in late 2017, early 2018. And we would flip between 40 and 50 houses. We did that for a number of years, and it slowed down a lot the last couple of years with interest rates, but I still have that business. We don't do as much in it now, but
nice.
And then we started buying rentals together as well. And then I formed some other partnerships, and just, I mean, it's just kind of grown and grown and grown. And then in 2020, I ended up forming a hard money lending business with 3 friends who are also investors. And that's been probably my most successful business venture so far out of all of it. But that's kind of a quick recap, or a little bit of a recap on the last 20 years of how I got into it.
But what's fascinating to me is that two things really jumped out at me. Number one, that having gone through, the great financial crisis and having had rentals, going through that, you probably learned a tremendous amount that most investors today who are kind of getting started don't have that life experience and don't realize what's going on now in the economy and the similarities, the differences, and to kind of see how to navigate themselves in an environment like this, whereas you probably have a lot more, experience through that and therefore can make, more sound decisions, I would assume. That's the first thing that jumped out at me. The second thing is that you've really dabbled in quite a lot of it. You talked about fix and flips, but also rentals and multifamily. And I know you mentioned, you did some other types of properties as well, car washes and office, whatever, different things that you kind of dabble. And the great thing about real estate, as well as the hard money lending, even though that's not real estate per se, it's a mortgage, it's a lending business, but it's very adjacent to real estate. And you're basically in that, in the world, very deeply involved. And so you have this kind of well-balanced experience, which comes across obviously through your podcast and through the conversations that you have, through the meetups that you do, but also for less experienced investors who are kind of starting out, they really don't know where to begin. It's like, do I pick one thing? Do I try to juggle it all? Do a lot of different things? And I think your example of your experience is having gone through it and trying to pick one thing and go with that, and then be successful in that. And then along the way, try out some different things and see if they work and they don't.
Yeah, exactly. I think also I've always had, I don't know who said this originally, but it stuck with me in that it's always a good thing to have one hand down and one hand up, and try to help the people, pull them up to another level if they're looking to do that maybe don't have as much experience or as much success as you do. And at the same time, don't sleep on the fact that there are a lot more experienced people out there than you, always. So I always try to, I went through a period of time where networking was really, that was my focus. For probably 2 solid years, I had a Calendly invite where anybody could grab it. And I would do a coffee meeting once a week at least with a newer investor or just another person that I had never met before. That was my only criteria. Every week I'm going to do this. And after 2 years, I'm going to have met 104 people if I'm consistent about it. And that, I just was doing it. I wasn't trying to make a thing out of it or be, have it be a talking point. It was just something that I was doing, and I was enjoying it. And man, by the time I got done with that kind of slew of just sit down meetings, I felt like I knew so many people that I could literally text or call anyone with any type of a problem and probably get referred to the right person for it.
Right.
So that was huge for me, the networking part of it. And then, also taking the opportunities to present at, meetups or just be involved. I don't run them directly, but I'm kind of like the guy behind the guy on a couple of these meetups, and I'll help set things up, line up, speakers, and just do whatever I can to help out. So I really enjoy it. If I could get paid to do that, that would be probably my perfect job.
That's amazing. I mean, it probably helps a lot through the experience you had in the recruiting, the HR section, because a lot of that is really just, it's dealing with people, talking to people, meeting people, finding the right people. And, that shows through for sure in what you do.
Yeah. And, I was thinking about this the other day too. Ted, my podcast co-host, he was talking to me about something, and just, with my interview style. And I was thinking back, I don't know what the number is, but it's in the thousands for sure of people that I've interviewed either over the phone or in person. It's just so like second nature that after a while, I just am fascinated with people in general. So I would go off script when I'm supposed to be interviewing people about like, oh, what is your software programming background? I'd be like, why? I see you lived in New Jersey. What was that like? You know what I mean? I just pull out random things that I was curious about. And I think that's always been with me, and it's served me well with a lot of different ways. But yeah, networking and getting to meet people and being genuinely curious, I think really comes across when you meet a new person. So
Yeah.
I think that's, if anything, that might be one thing that I'm good at, if anything.
Yeah. Listen, I mean, don't sell yourself short there, but I mean, the truth is, I do the same exact thing in terms of finding like random things and just something pops out to me and I'm curious about it, and I just ask, and I love that, and that's comes across in your interviewing style for sure. Having been in your podcast recently, and the networking thing, I mean, that cannot be stressed enough. The fact that you went out of your way to meet like one person every single week, that adds up, and I'm assuming this is mostly or all in your market in Omaha, correct?
Yeah.
So I mean, that's like you become very known, not just that you know people, but you become very known in the community as someone who, who does whatever it is that you do. So anyone who's out there thinking about like, how can I do this? The question really comes to me like, how do you do it? Meaning, yes, you can put up a Calendly link, and I have that also, and I meet new people every single day through my Calendly. I have people reach out to me, but that's more on Zoom. I'm not going out and having a coffee with someone in person. Takes a lot more energy, a lot more effort for sure. But I think you make that connection much stronger also. But for someone who's listening to this, who's like, okay, like, how do I do that? Do I just go to a local meetups, real estate meetups, like Google it or REIN? And the truth is you can, because that's just my opinion. There's tons out there in every city. There are real estate meetups. You can even go on Bigger Pockets. They have a section there where you can search meetups. Whoever's posting meetups, at least on Bigger Pockets still. I don't know, I haven't been there for a while, but you can search according to your zip code, within a certain mile distance, et cetera. It'll give you every single, meeting or meetup or anything like that. You can go to meetup.com and search real estate. There's tons of resources out there. So that's just what I would do. But Owen, what would you do if you were to do this all over again? Or someone new trying to do it?
I 100% agree with what you just said. And I think the low-hanging fruit is social media has made it so much easier to connect, and which is the whole point, right? But if you get on, like, let's say Facebook, so, Facebook's probably old school to a lot of the younger folks out there. But if you get on Facebook, they have a groups, section where you can find really anything you're looking for, right? So you can search REIA in your local market, and there's generally going to be one. If you have any town of any size, there's probably going to be a local REIA and or a real estate meetup group, an investing group, or both, and depending on the size of the city, right? And what I would do if I was starting from ground zero with that, I would join those groups and start noticing who the people are that are participating. And here's the thing that I did, and I'm not saying this is the right way, but it seems to have served me fairly well. I just shared. So I would just say, hey, I don't know who needs to hear this, but this is how you don't install a water heater, or like whatever, Sometimes I'd make a funny post and be like, here's a day in the life of a real estate investor. But I would also share like tips and tricks. I'd be like, if I found a way that I could save money by going to a different vendor than what I'm used to, I'd be like, I don't know if anybody's looking for direct mail, but here's who I just use. So I would just share all of those contacts that I would have all the time, including contractors, which there's people out there that have kind of a scarcity versus an abundance mentality.
Yes.
And a lot of them don't, they kind of hoard their contacts with those things, bankers, lenders, insurance companies, contractors. But I was just like, hey, if I can use it, you guys can use it. There's plenty to go around for everybody. And that was just always my thing. And so the more I shared, the more I would get people that would reach out to me. They'd be like, hey, I really appreciate what you did there. And they would maybe share something with me, or they would add to the discussion, and I'd learn something new off of that. So it just,
absolutely.
I think if you go into it with the mindset of, you can't do this overnight. It's a building block. It's like you're building a foundation wall. You don't start with the top blocks, right? You got to set the foundation and do it right and make sure it's stable. And then you can start adding and making moves, the further along you get.
Sure.
That was just always my approach with it.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, it cannot be stated enough also the power of social media, and especially Facebook groups. I used to use them quite a bit, a little bit less now, but I've seen the power. I actually started a couple of Facebook groups myself, and it was very active right at the beginning of COVID. Like, I was extremely active in that, and we had a ton of connections, but it kind of fizzled out for me personally, but I definitely see the power of it for sure. And especially if you're doing something local. Mine was not local, obviously, but it was more, kind of global, but real estate connections. Nonetheless, made a ton of new connections and really further developed those existing connections and people and relationships. And I've grown, close with a lot of people through that in business and elsewise. So I definitely see the power in that. Oh, and I'm really curious because you mentioned that over all the years, you've been doing this for 20 years now, the most successful business that you've had so far has been this, relatively new hard money lending venture that you guys started. And I'm curious to know like a little bit more about that because that's something that obviously it's a totally different skill set than, fixing and flipping houses, owning rentals, doing that. There's a lot that goes into starting a business, running a business like that, doing due diligence that needs to be done and to be successful. So I'm curious to know like where the idea came up with to start it and kind of how you guys run it and how you became so successful.
Oh, no, yeah. Great question. That business I kind of just fell into. I was never really setting out to become a hard money business, like a legit one. I was just going to maybe, when you flip houses, there's times where you have like no money and then times you have piles of money because you just never know when it's going to come back in.
Yep.
And so rather than try and force it into a deal that I maybe didn't necessarily want to buy just because I happen to have the money, because, like if you're an investor, you just start getting itchy when you have a bunch of cash laying around. You're like, got to find a deal. And I started talking to my business partner, Brandon, I'm like, hey, I know there's a couple of guys in town that do hard money and they do really well with it. I mean, they can charge 20%. That's local here. I know people are going to freak out when they hear
Right.
that that aren't in my area, but 20%, no points. And I know a couple of guys that were doing it and they were just killing it. And I was
Wow.
like, Brandon, maybe we should like check this out. We could, we know enough investors. We know who we can trust. And, we should maybe do a few of these. So we hit kind of a brick wall when we went to banks and, 'cause we had a few, maybe a couple $100,000 and that doesn't go very far, right? You could buy like a house or you can loan on a house. And so we went to our bank that we did a lot of business with and we're like, hey, here's what we're thinking of doing. Is there, could we work out a line of credit where, we could use that and then relend it? And then they're kind of like, well, pump the brakes here. How would we collateralize this?
Right.
Like, that's not going to work. So we just kind of stopped and lost steam on that. And then re-enter another friend of mine that runs a meetup group here. He was having lunch one day and I joined him and I'm like, what are you guys talking about? And he's like, oh, we're talking about hard money. And I was like, oh, interesting. So we sat down and talked through it and determined like if we kind of joined forces with some of our partners that we already had and were familiar with, we'd have quite a bit more capital to work with. And so we started basically with $1 million. So we each kicked in, the equivalent of $250K a share that we had. And I mean, even at the time, I used a line of credit that I had probably like a 4 or 5% interest rate on. I advanced it off of that and then funded my share of the buy-in for the hard money business because I had a lot of other stuff in equity. And so we did that and like we could not keep enough money. And so then that led to telling friends and family about it. And they're like, well, we can pay you 8, 9, 10% if we can use your money. And then, you just let us know, we can give us, 2-3 months and we can get it back to you. These are short-term loans, 6 months, and that just grew and kept growing and kept growing. And 2 of my partners, well, actually 3 of them, I'm probably the worst at it, but they're really good at raising capital and they do a lot of multifamily syndication deals. So they have a natural audience with, private individuals that have money, family offices, things like that. So fast forward, we started that in late 2020. So we've been just a hair over 4 years. And we grew it from $1 million to we're right about 24 million right now with available capital that we've loaned out. And it's been so fun. I like the best part about it is I think the thing that gives you a leg up if you're a really experienced investor is if you're looking at hard money, you're underwriting it like you would be the one buying it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's that's the approach we always took. So we said, if I can make these numbers work, if I bought this, then we will fund the deal. And if it goes sideways, like let's say worst case, somebody gets out over their skis, it's not a successful business plan that they execute on, we have to take the property. Let's say we have to foreclose. I'm pretty comfortable that I can turn that house that we're taking over into something that would sell.
Right.
And so that gave us kind of like multiple layers of assurance that we could make this a viable business. And so here we are almost 500 loans later and 4 years later, and it's been fun and we've grown. We've hired 2 people, we've got the 4 partners still involved. And I just love that business. And we've expanded outside of our kind of like little hometown. So we've gone to other Midwest states. We've done some kind of outliers outside, but I really enjoy that business a
That's
lot.
pretty cool. I mean, that's amazing. And it is incredible business to do. And I think most people don't realize how lucrative lending money can actually be because, you talk about even charging 20%, but even if you're charging 10%, in my day when I was doing hard money loans, it was like 10 and 12% and 2 points or something like, or 1 point. Like that was like the standard, obviously you had some more, some less, but that was pretty much like the market rate that was going. But, you don't really factor in necessarily how long the loan is, right? If you're loaning 10%, but it's only a 2 or 3 month loan, that actually can be like 30 or 40%, right? Or it's annualized. So there's really a lot, especially when you have all that money in there in the, in the pool to loan out. That's incredible. So are these all two like fix and flip type loans or do you have other products as well?
Yeah, so I'm glad you asked that because I would say kind of our bread and butter is going to be your single family house flipper or somebody that's buying, the term now is BRRRR. So you buy, rehab, rent, refinance, repeat. So those are two types of investors, and sometimes they're the same person, but I would say that makes up probably more than half of our business. And then we also do some bridge lending. So we'll fund, deals. Let's say somebody is going to take down a multifamily asset or a larger commercial asset. We don't do a ton of those, but the ones we have been, a couple $1 million, $3 million. So we've done bridge debt on larger assets that fall on the multifamily side. And we've done a few like business related loans.
Interesting.
So an energy company, and let's see, a fractional ownership of jets. We've done some loans there. And now I know those are complete one-offs, but
Right.
we got really comfortable with them, and we had our attorneys really involved in the underwriting on that. So it was weird and a weird one-off that we did on a couple of times, but they were fun, and we still have those relationships in place. So I think we'll probably do more of those. But we actually just hired a new person for our team, and he's essentially going to function as a COO. So he's going to look at our systems and processes, our tech, because, we kind of just grew this and didn't really have a great backbone for the technology and the CRM and all of that stuff. So we're bringing him on board to kind of smooth out a lot of our rough edges, and then also lay down a roadmap for better SOPs, better capital raising opportunities, connecting with other groups that we're not already connected with. So I think I'm really excited. I think the growth of this business is going to help a lot. Real estate's been a lot tougher the last couple of years. So we haven't transacted as many deals
Right.
on the flipping side of the business. So fortunately, lending is in the picture and it's
Yeah.
been going well.
Yeah, and I've seen that. And the truth of the matter is, in an environment like this, in this type of the part of the cycle, lending is probably the most successful it can be, right? And more than other types of assets or investment opportunities. So, and that's the great thing about lending is that really you can do it at any point in the real estate cycle, so economic cycle. So you're really up when other people are down. You're up when other people are up. It's just different phases.
The best part of it, like I always liked finding deals and underwriting them. And then when I finally bought something, maybe it's just me, but like I get bored with things after I own them. And a lot of times it's not like your phone rings all the time with good news when you own real estate. It's never good news.
It's never
This is
good.
like a problem. Like your phone rings, it's going to be a problem, and you
Yeah.
just get used to dealing with it. And of course, there's problems in the lending business as well. But the thing I like most about it is you still get to see the deal, you underwrite it, and when you make a decision to fund it, you don't have to do anything else really, other than of course, stay in communication and so forth. But that's on them. Your job is underwrite it, approve it, loan the money, and collect it when it comes back in, and
Right.
that's much better than termites and toilets and all the rough things that can happen with real estate.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. It's a different aspect of it, but definitely, I hear that. Definitely more fun aspect of being involved in that. Oh, and I'd
yeah,
love to transition now to what we call the final four because time has flown by. We're having fun over here, and I wish we could go longer, but I do have another commitment after this, and we're gonna get right to it. So the first question for you is, what's the worst job that you ever had?
the worst job I ever had. So I'm thinking of two. I'll try and keep this quick here. I would say when I was a kid, I did anything I could think of where I could make some money. So I had a lawn business. I would walk beans for those of you that are from the Midwest area where farming is prevalent. So I would do that and detassel corn. Those were horrible in hindsight. But I think I hit a low point. This sounds bad, and there's nothing against this store, but there was a Sprint PCS store. I lost my job in, let's see, it was probably 2002. And I was having a really difficult time finding something comparable in the recruiting space. There just wasn't anything that I could throw my resume in or get hired for. But I needed money, right? I had to pay the bills. And I just said, you know what? I went to a temp service and I was like, I'll do anything. Anything you guys need that pays money, I will do it. And they said, well, we've got this, but we think it's probably not what you're and I'm like, just tell me, what is it? And they're like, you could be a greeter at the Sprint store during the holidays. And I'm like, what does that mean? What's a greeter? And they're like, a person who greets people. They walk in the store, you just say, hi, welcome to Sprint. And that's not a terrible job. And I get it. Like, it was like $10 an hour, $12 an hour or something. It was like not much money. It was not much money at all. But I had people that walked in and that I knew, and they're like, what's going on here? Why are you a greeter at the Sprint store? And I just remember I was so humbled, and I don't know if ashamed is the right word, but that was very humbling for me. And it was a turning point when I realized that I wanted to control my own destiny more than working for somebody else where I could all of a sudden be without a job. So that was probably the worst job, but I could spin that a different way and say it was a really good thing for me because it changed my mindset.
Yeah. I mean, listen, it's fascinating, but the fact that you're open to it also, and just find new things to do, and you learn along the way. So every job is, whether it's good or bad. That's why I always ask, what's the worst? It doesn't have to necessarily be bad per se, but you definitely learn some things along the way.
Welcome to Sprint. The worst part about it is, real quick, that I would get people that would start asking me questions about phones, and I couldn't answer. Like they told me I can't answer those. I was supposed to like direct them to salespeople, and I'm like, man, I could sell this phone way better than this guy could. So anyway.
That's hilarious. It sounds like a Saturday Night Live skit or something, like.
It probably could have been.
Second question, what's a book you've read that's given you a paradigm shift?
Okay, so I will leave the Rich Dad Poor Dad genre aside here because I'm sure you get that answer quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
I would say I did a brief stint as a financial planner, read a whole bunch of personal finance books, investing, that kind of thing. And I happened to pick one up. Real estate wasn't even on my radar. I happened to pick one up written by a guy named Robert Allen. Okay. And he wrote a book called Multiple Streams of Income. And this was, probably, I don't know, late 90s-ish, maybe early 2000s. I picked that up and I read it. And the premise is, as you can probably figure out by the title, it's basically how do you create more than one stream of income coming into your life. So if you have a job, how do you create another stream of income? Whether it's, okay, I'm going to be an Uber driver, or maybe I'm going to start just a small widget selling business, or like some type of a side hustle, right? But then he started talking about investing, like in real estate and businesses and this and that. And I was like, I really liked that book. This totally makes sense to me. And it started kind of reframing how I was looking at the world. And then I was like, I wonder what else this guy wrote. And then I found he wrote one called Nothing Down. And that book he accepted a challenge from an LA Times reporter a long time ago, where he made the claim that I could go to any city in the United States, if you pick it, and I could buy a real estate deal with no money out of my pocket in 1 week. And so somebody took him up on the challenge. It was a big LA Times article back in the day. And he did it. He found somebody that would do owner financing on a single family house. And it was, I think in San Diego or somewhere in California. And I was like, what?
Yeah.
No way. Because I always thought you had to have like tens and tens of thousands of dollars to invest in real estate. I thought you had to have the big down payment, and that's how you did it. But then I started reading on creative finance, and it blew my mind. So that was, I think, a really pivotal moment for me. And then, of course, I started digesting all the other real estate stuff out there. Bigger pockets.
That's so cool.
Much easier now.
It is, but those fundamentals go a long way, so that's awesome. Third question, what's a skill or talent that you would like to learn?
I would like to learn how to fly a plane. I've always kind of kicked it around. And then when I started, I have a family, and it's, a little risky to go and get your pilot's license, but I have some friends that do it. They fly smaller planes, prop planes. And I think I might do that. I'm officially 50 now as of about a month ago. So I have to, scratch the itch of the midlife crisis that's been brewing in me for a while. So maybe I'll be a pilot, and the other one might be learn Spanish. I've always wanted to learn Spanish. I took Spanish 3 in high school, and I remember like dos cervezas, por favor, and that's about it.
That's pretty cool. I mean, listen, learning to fly a plane, that's an awesome thing. Learning a new language, Probably a lot harder, to be honest, because learning the way to plane, from what I've heard from pilots, it's really not a lot. You take some lessons and things like that, and you can get off on the plane. But, practice is really what changes everything. So good for you.
Exactly.
Sounds good. Fourth and final question is going to be, what does success mean to you?
Success means that I can, in the middle of the day, if I choose to, I could go and do whatever I want without any repercussions. I could push off a meeting if I needed to. If I wanted to go catch my daughter's sporting event, if I wanted to go pick her up from school, if I wanted to do anything, if I wanted to grab coffee or something like that and it wasn't on the schedule, I could do it. So success to me is freedom of time and being able to spend that how I choose and with who I choose. That's success to me.
That's it. That's what it's all about. I couldn't agree more. Owen, this has really been awesome. A lot of fun. Great conversation as always. And for our listeners, where can they find you or reach out to you if they want to?
Yeah. So let's see. Ria Radio is a podcast that I run with co-host Ted Kosh. We're real active on there. Ted's really good about the socials. I am on LinkedIn. You can reach out to me, Owen Dashner there. I'm also on Instagram, Owen Money Real Estate. That's my handle there. If anybody wants to give me a follow, that'd be great.
That's awesome. We'll make sure to put all those in the show notes, and just really grateful for you to join us once again. This has been a lot of fun and really, really cool. I don't know if you know him, but we actually had another Omaha guest just a couple weeks ago on the podcast, Seth Campbell.
I know Seth. Yeah. I haven't talked to him in a while, but yeah, I know Seth. That's
I figured,
cool.
Omaha's a pretty small, relatively small town in terms of real estate. So
you got to be careful. Your podcast episodes are going to start getting infested with Omaha natives here if you're not careful.
If you have any more great people to interview, I'm always here. Love to sit down with great people. So awesome. Appreciate that. And thanks to our listeners. You guys have been awesome joining us and listening all the way to the end once again. And remember, until next time, the best advice comes only when you ask. Real quick, I have one question for you. Did you like this episode? If you did, I want to ask you a huge favor. See, the biggest thing that helps this podcast grow and that will spread this message to the whole world is that if you leave a review, a rating, and subscribe to the podcast. What that does is it basically tells the platforms that this podcast is out on is that you like my stuff and I'm doing something right. So take a few seconds out of your day, hit that subscribe button, leave a rating or review. I would be extremely grateful. Also, I want to hear from you guys. So I want to hear some feedback. If you have any questions for future episodes, please find me on LinkedIn, send me a DM, a connection request, Yonah Weiss, and I'd love to hear from you.